it's important to understand that we are interdimensional and that we experience life not just on the physical plane, but we experience life emotionally, mentally, intuitively, and that we have, even in the day, we have major shifts in a 24-hour period in terms of where we experience life. So like right now, I'm awake. And so there's a part of me that's attentive to the physical dimension. But when I fall asleep at night, something is shifted, and now if I'm experiencing dreams, I'm experiencing another dimensional perception and far less attention or no attention to the physical reality. Hence I'm asleep. But there's a physics in that as well, and it has to do with this antakarana. And see, the causal body, ultimately, the soul wants to express in the world. One of the laws of the soul is the law of service, and it wants to make a service contribution to the betterment of something beyond itself. And yet it needs a cooperative outer garment to do that, and that's personality. And the personality is threefold: mental, emotional, and physical. And it wants to use all three parts of the personality to express its agenda, its creative intention. Yet the personality for thousands of lives has been the dominating energy of the life. The personality is where ego arises, as we typically use that word. And so slowly the soul is persuading the personality to let go of the reins. Now, there's an interesting thing that happens. First, realize that this causal body is found on the higher mental plane. And so the personality is the region of consciousness below that. And there is slowly being developed a communication bridge over many incarnations that links the soul with the personality. And there's another span of this bridge that links the soul with the monad or the life above. And that bridge is called the Antahkarana. And the Antahkarana is a structure that doesn't exist naturally. It literally has to be built, and it's built over the crucible of countless incarnations. But it's built through three processes that are integrated into the fabric of a spiritually minded person's day-to-day life. The first is to study, to build your higher mind, because the causal body, the soul, is found on the higher mental plane. So the more we can use our higher minds, which is more abstract, the more we can exercise that mental field within us, the more we're in the neighborhood of the soul. The second is heartfelt service. The more we can commit ourselves to serving something beyond ourselves, the more that is said to facilitate the building of this inner bridge. And thirdly is meditation. Those are the so-called three pillars of the esoteric philosophy: study, service, and meditation. And those three pillars are also the three pillars that facilitate the building of this Antahkarana, linking soul with personality. And when the Antahkarana is completely built, there's an unobstructed conduit between personality and soul, and so the soul can communicate to the personality without an ounce of distortion. For you and I, on the path, we have partially built Antahkaranas. In many ways, where you are on the path can be determined by how much of the Antahkarana has been constructed.
I can say that man is in pieces, like Isis's husband Osiris, who was cut into 14 pieces, and those 14 pieces have to be put back together. They exist along the life thread, so they're all part of the same energy system, but in terms of consciousness, they are still separated from each other. The lower man, because he is spirit, essentially, begins to wake up to his limitation. He is threefold. He has a mind, emotions, and body, etheric physical body. He's a unified personality, but he begins to detect there's something else. At certain moments, a higher type of energy seems to flow into his consciousness, and he realizes, perhaps, that has a higher power, a soul, whatever. He begins to bridge towards it. And that act of bridging is called Antahkarana. It consists of using meditation to build lines of light between the part of ourself that we are aware of and the parts of ourself of which we are not yet aware, but have the intimation that they exist. You can have a sudden experience. What was that? I want more of that. So we start to use the age-old methods of putting ourselves back together. The antakarana, or inner organ, or bridge of light, is really threefold. It's not just one line of light connecting our lower mind with our higher mind, okay? It is a line of light connecting the mental aspect of our personality with the soul and soul body. It is another line of light connecting that soul body with what is called the abstract mind, or the technical terms, monastic permanent atom, the atom which is found on the highest level of the mental plane. That's two of the strands. And then we have the kind of bridge of light, or rainbow bridge, that we are taught how to build now. And that is a line of lighted substance directly connecting the lower mind, with what we call technically the mental unit on the fourth subplane, with that monastic permanent atom, and then you have a triangle. And that triangle is really the Antahkarana, even though we are concentrating now on a direct connection with what we call the spiritual triad. It is above the soul. What is the spiritual triad really? One way to understand it is just the way the soul has a personality, mind, emotions, and body, so does our spirit in heaven, our own Father in heaven aspect, have a kind of personality, a threefold personality. And the spiritual triad, consisting of what we normally call Atma Buddhi Manas, spiritual will, spiritual love, spiritual intelligence, is the personality of our God in heaven, of our monad, of our spirit.
To continue in our understanding of this process, let me further elaborate on the Antahkarana a bit. I mentioned to you that the Antahkarana is being built, and it's built through three systems: through meditation, through study, and through service. But understand that the Antahkarana itself, there's a whole science to it, and that there are said to be two fundamental threads that are at the core of it. One thread is called the life thread, and another is called the consciousness thread. Now, the consciousness thread is said to be coming from the soul, and it anchors itself in the center of the brain, in the etheric region of the brain, not the dense physical, but right very close to the place that we would say is the area of the pineal gland. And the life thread anchors itself in the heart. Now, why is that important? Because it's anchored in 2 points, the heart and the head. When you fall asleep, what's happening is that the consciousness thread anchored in the head, it's being dislodged, and that it's slowly removing itself from the brain and beginning to draw itself back to the higher mental plane, back into the causal body itself. And so when it dislodges from the brain, we fall asleep. But now, as that thread is drawing itself back to the causal body, the end of the thread is going through those other planes. So it's going to go through the emotional plane, the lower mental plane, and into the higher mental plane and the causal body. And it's in that period where the phenomena of experiencing life on those planes occur, because we have dreams. The type of dreams that we have a measure of correlation to where that thread is in its journey from letting go of the brain all the way back up to the causal body. And there's a lot of wonderful things to consider about the nature of dreams itself, but here I just want to point out that as that thread is rising, you're experiencing measures of alternative awareness, but that will change as well according to where that thread is. And then when it enters back into the causal body, that's equivalent to what science would say is stage 4 of non-REM. In stage 4 of non-REM, that's often called a dreamless sleep. It's so deep. It's, that time when your body is so still that if a person is right next to you, it's hard to tell, are you even breathing? It's so deep. And you don't have any dreams or very minimal images at all, and so there's no recollection of that period. But that's when the thread finally enters back into the causal body. Each step of the way in that drawing of the thread, you're experiencing an altered dimension of consciousness. But all along, the life thread remains anchored. And so the life thread, which is channeling the life impulse of the spirit itself through the causal body right into the heart is the great distributor of the life principle through the blood, that your body still functions. You still got breathing going on. The heart is still pumping, even in your deepest sleep. The biology and the life principle continues to animate the form. Now, in contrast, how is that different than death? And in a way, there's very little difference. It has been said that every night we rehearse death, and that it's, in a sense, every night we are rehearsing the process of consciousness abstracting itself out of form and going into what appears to be a formless realm. Every night. The difference is this: with death, not only does the consciousness thread dislodge itself, but so does the life thread. A lot of people who approach spirituality from a Christian point of view will talk about the so-called silver cord. That's the same as what we're talking about here, the life thread. That dislodges itself from the heart, and both threads are abstracted, and that's what death is. When both threads abstract and the whole antakarana system draws itself back to the causal body.
The parts of man are not consciously together, and antakarana is the method by which we become conscious of the higher aspects of our own nature. We venture through the act of penetrative pioneering into the higher reaches of our nature, which, unless they have a bridge of light to descend through, cannot be accessed. So we build a bridge of light to connect ourselves with our Father in heaven, literally, our monad, and in that way, all the way from the very highest that we are, which is the Father in heaven, the spirit aspect, the monad, all the way down to the lowest aspects of our personality, down to the base of the spine, we have this line of vital energy. It consists of life, it consists of consciousness, it consists of creative intelligence, and then we can be truly creative, taking our impulses from the area where the divine purpose is formulated, because we are participating in the divine purpose when we deal with our highest aspect, our spirit aspect. We are participating in the divine plan when we deal with our own point of spiritual will. And those great realizations can be ours in our personality consciousness if we build the antakarana, or bridge of light, slowly, 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 through occult meditation, through service, through obedience to the higher commands. Then the highest and the lowest will meet. That's a great mantram or word of power for the seventh ray of magic, connecting the highest self with the lowest self, and we will be straightened out, and we will be built through and through a completely unified, integrated spiritual being, spiritual, soul, and physicality all united via the Antakarana.